Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to such an interesting session that we'll be having the honor to speak today on cybersecurity and hybrid threats. I have the great honor here to be among great experts and specialists. So let me start with His Excellency Cyril Svoboda, former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Czech Republic. We'll continue with Mrs. Camila Amunti, Public Policy Advisor of Cyber Peace Institute from the Swiss Confederation. We'll continue with Mr. Joseph Jarnecki, a Research Fellow in Cybersecurity in United Kingdom. Then with Mrs. Hoda Al-Saimi, Director of Center for Cybersecurity from New York University, Abu Dhabi. And then we'll continue with Mr. Scott Goodstein, founder and CEO of Catalyst Campaign from the United States. And then last but not least, Dr. Xavier Pasco, President, Fondation pour la Recherche Stratégique, République Française. First of all, I would like to mention the importance of the global security, which the landscape is increasingly marked by cyber threats and hybrid attacks. And this exploits the vulnerability of the digital world. This session will focus from one side on the complex challenges and issues on cybersecurity, as well as the necessary responses to protect the national interest. Cybersecurity is not limited to protecting information systems, but also extends to ensuring the security of nations and maintaining the world order. Hybrid threats, combining both conventional and unconventional strategies, jeopardize the stability of nations by exploiting vulnerabilities, both physical and digital. So we'll address some crucial themes from the risks of espionage and sabotage of the dissemination of false information. So we'll have the opportunity from one side to explore these various dimensions, and at the same time, our experts will respond to some of the technological, social, and political dimensions and aspects. So, of course, the main challenge still stays today. So I would like to start with you, Mr. Svoboda, since it is important, first of all, to offer this panorama on the cybersecurity, what is happening today. So if you can introduce us with the main political challenges and how do you see it from your political perspective? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here on the panel. You know, due to the modern communication, so we shorten the distance in the world. We shorten the way how to communicate, technically, from time point of view, but we do not create closeness. On the contrary, so the gaps are more visible. What happens in one place in the world, immediately everyone knows. That's the problem. So this is the tool. So we have got under cyber warfare and information warfare is today very, very dangerous. And during the course of the history, all the wars were hybrid ones. But due to the technical development, so the effectiveness of the cyber warfare and hybrid warfare and information warfare is more effective. And in my country, because I'm also expert on the constitutional law, me personally, I wrote the Czech constitution. We were the team of 6 persons and we wrote the Czech constitution. I'm also expert on the constitutional law. So we are now very concerned about the 2 aspects of cyber attacks. The first one is how to protect the strategic infrastructure of the state. It's very important. So because we can be confronted by the attack, nobody knows where is the line of the attack and who is attacking, and we have to protect the strategic infrastructure of the state. Yes, it's a technical question. But there is one more important and more complicated: how to protect the decision-making of the state. Because we are a democratic country. And some decisions which are taken by the government must be approved by the parliament. And how to adjust this constitutional demand, democratic demand, to the challenge that we could be confronted to decide in very short time. Maybe we will have 1 hour for decision, for the strategic decision of the state. How to protect, for example, the transport or to limited transport, or to impose some restrictions on the state. How to protect the decision of the state not to lose the democratic character of the state. Theoretically, it's easy, but I could imagine a very huge and very effective cyber attack against the state, which will harm very effectively the decision-making. And I think that it is still somewhere aside the main interest. But in my country, we are very active in finding a solution. Because, you know, NATO has a scenario. There's a very detailed scenario which is prepared by NATO, and very effective and very detailed. So what are to be done by the politicians, by the military, by the journalists, by the diplomats. Everyone is, but it was written not respecting any constitution. But believe me, in the democratic world, it is very difficult, because every decision is to be approved by the parliament, and how to make the decision-making effective if the state is attacked by the huge cyber attack. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, politics should have a greater role, and it's very important that there are some political responses as soon as possible, as we have already seen that there have been many efforts, and more should be so, because we have seen many states which have been victims of cyber attacks. So indeed, this is such an issue which should have immediately the attention, especially of the policymakers. Well, now I would like to ask the second question to Mrs. Al-Ghazaimi on how can these threats affect critical infrastructure, governments and international institutions, as well as companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Voro, for the question. I think cybersecurity today has the single hand in disrupting nations, because threats that are amplified on the surface of digital sphere does not stay within specific border. The motivations of the different actors is not very clear. It can be easily instigated to cause international harm across borders without control on the level of the harm that can be instigated. If we looked at the Global Cyber Index that is being published by the ITU, we have an estimation of cyber competencies globally that says amidst the 194 countries globally that are leading in cybersecurity, in their cybersecurity posture, we have the United States as one of the top 5, Canada, South Korea, and as well Australia. So it's mostly the big nations and the big economic nations globally that are ranking in their number 1 cyber postures. So let's see, for example, and take a closer look to the local ecosystem in the United States. According to University of Maryland, we have a cyber attack initiated on a critical infrastructure in the US every 39 seconds. Let that sink in. Every 39 seconds, you would have a cyber attack that would impact at least 3 Americans. This is in a silo or in a governance structure that's being considered one of the strongest in the world. The cost of cyber attacks annually in the United States is estimated to be around $6 trillion per year, and estimated to 10.5 trillion for 2025. So that goes beyond GDPs of specific nations globally. And if we looked at the counter-global movement that is being built internationally and collectively to build for cyber de-escalation on the multitudes of these infrastructures, we are seeing an investment that does not form any parallel to the amount of cost that we're standing to lose, which is around $600 to $500 billion globally. Yes, we have the mass of them, targeting critical infrastructure and nuclear systems and chemical plants and supply chain infrastructure, transportation, gas line, and we've seen in the past 3 years how gas lines structures has been disrupted, and how as well oil mega companies has been disruptive and this kind of hybrid attacks that exist globally. So it's not a mythical creature, it's a current reality that we're living, and that's going to also be amplified by the threat that we have and that exists today with the emerging technologies. The threat that exists behind AI technologies, quantum computing, and more than this. Why? Because we're building for unequal power of defense and attacks in cybersecurity. And we don't, attacks happen every second, but to build a regulation and international norm on cybersecurity today, and I've asked the mass of you here in the room, what is the cyber governance structure that exists globally? We have nothing. And how many years does it take to build a cyber governance regulation? We have actually to stand for at least 18 months to 3 years in order to build a single regulation to build for cyber attribution globally to those attacks. And for that, we have no time because attacks happen in a fraction of seconds today.
Thank you very much.
Can you allow me to build a bit on that? Sorry, because I think
I was giving the word to you actually.
Super, because I think we are touching upon the threat landscape, and I think it's very important to understand how this is the evolution of the threat landscape in the last 12 months. it's clear that we've seen a significant increase in the number of cyber attacks, but also the variety of attacks and also the consequences. And there is a geopolitical context to it as well, which is influencing this landscape. In particular, the war of invasion in Ukraine, which has affected tremendously not only the belligerent to the conflict, but also nations across the world. We've been monitoring over 3,000 cyber attacks in the context of the war in Ukraine, and this has impacted over 55 countries across the world and affected 23 critical infrastructure sectors. And this is since also actually the situation has degraded in other part of the world, particularly in the Middle East, we are also actually seeing threat actors moving from a conflict to another. So we're literally seeing threat actors that has been involved in the last 18 months in the context of the war in Ukraine, affecting as well and targeting institutions, people in Israel, Gaza. So I think it's important to mention that notion. There's also I think we have to understand that there are varying motives and agenda and type of actors. I think it's important that we situate the issue. So the threat actors, I think, type will vary from collective activists, which tend to have a political or an ideological agenda, and we are seeing them hugely taking part in conflicts, combining cyber attacks with kinetic operations. We are also seeing nation-state actors. This is very much a blurry line because for threat actors to be sponsored by a state, you have to have obviously evidence of it being guided either financially or technically. But we have some assumptions of that, and there's also a cyber criminals group which are getting more and more structured, literally building and developing a cybercrime as a franchise on the darknet, which tend to be motivated obviously by the financial gain. So we're seeing these impacting different level of society. Healthcare, for example, I think this has been a huge target as we've seen the skyrocketing of ransomware attacks against the healthcare sector, and that's just not happened actually during the pandemic and well before and well after, because the healthcare is a low risk and high revenue potential for cyber criminals. We are also actually seeing other critical actors, such as those who are providing humanitarian support, who's being targeted for different motives. This could be to disrupt their operations. They are targeted by disinformation campaigns. They are also targeted by cyber criminals who are interested in stealing the funding that they get. So I just want to situate that from a threat landscape perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the same question to Dr. So, since it is very important to see the international response to this. So, again, Mr. So, how can these threats affect the critical infrastructure, governments, companies? Let's put an accent to the private sector as well, since very often we leave this at the very end, whereas there should be a parallel response as well, and target more the private sector. So, thank you.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Donc, je suis le général Sow. Je me suis chargé de la lutte contre le terrorisme au Sénégal. Donc, comme vous le savez, comme l'a répété mes prédécesseurs, traditionnellement, les systèmes et infrastructures étaient séparés d'Internet avec un focus sur la sécurité physique. Excusez-moi. Donc, comme je le disais tantôt, donc, traditionnellement, les systèmes et nos infrastructures critiques vitales étaient séparés d'Internet, avec un focus sur la sécurité physique. En fait, c'est l'homme qui faisait tout. Maintenant, de nos jours, avec l'Internet et à travers les objets connexes, ces mêmes infrastructures, sont reliées à Internet, ce qui permet de réduire la main-d'œuvre ou le coût d'exploitation ou d'être beaucoup plus efficace. En ce sens, ces outils sont exposés, comme l'ont souligné mes prédécesseurs, aux cyberattaques et aux cybercriminels. Maintenant, comment ces impacts, ces attaques se manifestent? Ces attaques se manifestent de plusieurs manières. Nous avons surtout, par rapport aux entreprises, une paralysie de la liberté d'action. En fait, l'entreprise se réveille un matin, après une attaque cybernétique, elle se rend compte qu'elle n'a plus la liberté d'action pour agir, c'est-à-dire pour exécuter son mandat ou bien son cadre d'action. Ce qui veut dire que la connexion que l'entreprise devait avoir avec les services extérieurs et les services que l'entreprise devait pourvoir, tous ces services sont paralysés. Du coup, l'entreprise est dans une dynamique de chute vers des activités zéro impact. Et par rapport à ça également, nous pouvons déceler une paralysie professionnelle, une privation des services. Si c'est dans les hôpitaux, les populations qui se ruent vers les hôpitaux pour avoir des soins, toutes ces populations sont exposées dans la mesure où l'hôpital qui est paralysé ne peut plus offrir certains services. Les machines ne marchent plus, simplement elles sont infiltrées, elles sont paralysées. Donc, du coup, les populations souffrent de leur pathologie antérieure. Ce qui veut dire qu'aucun soin n'est prodigué. Et ça, vous voyez l'impact que ça peut créer sur les populations. Ça peut créer un soulèvement populaire, voire une insurrection populaire. Et du coup, ça met le gouvernement dans une situation inconfortable qui doit prendre certaines mesures. Donc, c'est pour dire que la cybersécurité a une dimension aujourd'hui mondiale. Maintenant, permettez-moi d'insister également sur les mesures qu'il faut prendre pour essayer de faire face à cette situation. Je pense que la première mesure, c'est d'harmoniser les politiques opérationnelles, de développer une culture de la cybersécurité et une stratégie d'application des politiques de cybersécurité et surtout sensibiliser les populations. Parce que ce que visent les cyberterroristes, c'est un soulèvement populaire. C'est priver les populations de certains biens de services, de certains besoins primaires. Par exemple, s'ils s'attaquent aux infrastructures de production d'eau ou d'électricité, c'est pour priver les populations d'eau et pour priver les populations d'électricité. Ce qui veut dire que personne ne peut vivre sans eau, ce n'est pas possible. Donc du coup, les populations sont dans une posture de vouloir se soulever et de créer, comment dirais-je, une situation d'insécurité dans le pays. Maintenant, tout ça pour dire qu'il nous faut également, dans les mesures à prendre, de sensibiliser les populations, de les rendre moins réceptives à la propagande qui est émise au niveau des cyberattaques. C'est-à-dire, en fait, quand il y a une privation d'eau, que les populations puissent comprendre qu'en fait, ce n'est pas quelque chose qui est volontaire, qui vient de l'État ou bien de l'entreprise privée, mais c'est quelque chose qui a été orchestré pour les faire mal et faire supporter la responsabilité à l'entreprise nationale. Du coup, nous devons sensibiliser toutes nos populations sur la portée de la cybersécurité. Et ensuite, cette sensibilisation doit commencer, à mon niveau, je pense, et ça doit commencer au niveau le plus bas, éduquer par l'éducation des populations, l'éducation des élèves dès le bas âge pour leur faire comprendre quelle est la portée de la cybersécurité. Dans la mesure où tout le monde est connecté sur les réseaux sociaux, si on fait ce travail en amont de prévention et d'application de ces stratégies, ça nous permet quand même, en cas de cyberattaque, de pouvoir développer une stratégie de résilience des populations par rapport au phénomène. En tout cas, c'est ce que je voulais dire, madame, et je vous remercie de votre aimable attention. Merci beaucoup.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Now I will ask on especially this collaboration public-private, and my question goes to Mr. Jarnecki, and more specifically, what steps can be taken to enhance collaboration between governments, international organizations, and the private sector in addressing these challenges and responding to hybrid threats? Thank you.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much. I think just first of all, to associate myself with the comments other participants have made thus far, I think I kind of agree wholeheartedly, which is a nice place to be in. Touching on the question you've raised there, I think I'll focus with regards to the cooperation and collaboration between international organizations and institutions. So as was alluded to previously, currently there is a completely lackluster set of cyber governance systems internationally. There is not really a consolidated attempt to tackle the issue. One thing, however, that is in place is a very long-winded process called the Open-Ended Working Group at the United Nations. This is occasionally a gathering of pretty much every single nation state globally to try to tackle the issue of responsible cyber behavior as well as other issues. So what should a state be doing and what should it not be doing in cyberspace? The objective of each of these sessions is to come up with a single document that represents a particular position on what states should and shouldn't be doing. The difficulty is that document is enshrined upon the perspective of reaching a consensus view. The difficulty with nation states and with countries is that once you reach a consensus view, you essentially reach a view which is untenable and unworkable for all, not necessarily workable for all. So the current processes that do exist miss how countries are actually looking to implement these norms and principles that are generally agreed. What, for example, does a national CERT, a cyber emergency response team, do when it does incident response on its critical national infrastructure? Does it help in certain respects or does it not help in other respects? Does a military integrate principles of responsibility in its operations and activity? Does it purchase, for example, commercial hacking tools from overseas firms and use them on its domestic populations or on foreign populations? Other principles like this are very valid. The difficulty then that we get to with existing processes and the desire for consensus is that we miss out, we flatten regional, national perspectives on these issues. As such, and this is where the stump speech comes to an end, my organization, the Royal United Services Institute, tries to put forward a global partnership to establish and understand different perspectives on responsible cyber behavior to, from the bottom up, as I think other participants have alluded to, raise and highlight opinions and rather than just build towards a consensus. So I think a first activity that needs to be conducted towards reaching greater international collaboration and cooperation is to ensure that there are stronger understandings of the diversity of opinions we have, rather than an attempt to homogenize and assume everything is a consensus at this early stage. And I think events like MEDays are crucial to having that dialogue, particularly outside of the Anglo-American sphere.
Yes, indeed, as it has been mentioned by our beloved panelists, this is such a hot topic, such a hot issue which concerns everyone. It's a worldwide concern, so indeed it should be treated as such. So, I would like to talk a little bit more on education, and this is where I will address the question to you, Mr. Goodstein, concerning how crucial is public awareness and education in combating cyber threats and hybrid attacks, and especially what initiatives should be prioritized to enhance cybersecurity literacy globally. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. And first and foremost, thank you to King Mohammed VI, Amadeus Institute, and MEDays for this forum and this chance to actually have these conversations, as my colleague just said. We can talk about this in a global perspective, as we did, but there's pragmatic things. And I would urge each of you to think about this in the terms of fire. There's arsonists, there's fire, there's bioterrorism, there's your local fire department, and then there's telling your kids not to play with matches, right? All of the above needs to be worked on. And so for me, these problems quadrupled during the pandemic. And as we sit here today, if you think about cybersecurity, we can talk about global terrorism-based cybersecurity, and several other of my panelists and colleagues talked about that. And there's tools out there, and there's 14 European nations that have all bought the warship level terrorist tools. But then there's, what are you doing to make sure grandma's computer is safe? How many of you in this room have changed your passwords? How many in this room have actually updated your computer software? Who's liable when you don't update your computer software and close out those security threats? Now expand that to the local company that has your credit card data. What if they didn't actually update their security protocols and threats? 90% of a lot of these phishing scams and other things have gotten so much worse during everyone working at home. Why is that? Well, when you remote work, you're talking about more phishing. You're talking about an insecure network. I'm sure that the hotels that we're all staying at and the airplanes that we're all at, those networks are completely secure. We're talking about weak endpoints. We're also talking about data privacy. Did you download your work data onto your family computer? Do you have that work data on your cell phone? We're talking about basic, good old-fashioned passwords. All of that I just said sounds very simplistic, but how complicated is that? And I'll pick on my own country. There was a giant phishing scam that affected the US election in 2016 that some of you may remember on the Hillary Clinton campaign because somebody clicked a link, right? It's as simple as clicking a link and giving all of your data away. So yeah, we can talk about Pegasus-based spyware and premium weapon security stuff. There are smarter people on this panel that can address that. But every one of you, I would challenge, go back to your own country and go back to your own NGO, go back to your own organization and ask the basic questions of good, do you have general security hygiene? Thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Thank you very much. Indeed, it is very important to impose to the employees, as it is the case now, to change, for example, the passwords each 3 months. So this is one of those measures taken. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, how many people in here actually change their passwords every 3 months? Show of hands. Anybody? A couple of the cybersecurity panelists are like, I don't know if I want to answer that. Right? It's just not done. And it's not done out of base of use or clearing your cookies or clearing your cache on your computer. It's not done for convenience, but we are now living in a very different world. And the statistics that Dr. Haut just gave us, what was it? Something like 100 and some countries, 194 countries are involved in this. That's all of us.
Yes, indeed. So, Mrs. Al-Ghazaimi had a comment?
Yes, I think it's very important to tie in international relations when it comes to capacity building, because when we are talking about education, we're talking about capacity building in terms of providing an open toolbox for building your defenses, building your security, building your also sovereignty. Digital sovereignty is a very tactical and important aspects to understand and to protect in here. And the current dialogue globally is centered around how Global North is building these advanced technologies, research labs, and science capacities for building future cybersecurity pioneering tools. And I think we need to as well to advocate through bilateral connections and international collaboration, effective programs that should exist as well in Global South, because let's admit it, the Global South is part of the supply chain that builds for our chips, build for our hardware, that goes into our security and all of this mass grids, electrical grids or healthcare grids or chemical plants that are available globally. So we need to acknowledge the fact that we need to empower as well Global South with knowledge, with science, with investments, so they can build their own collective sovereignty in order to build up a new type of technology. Most of the technology that we're having today is centered around a few design ethos, and I don't think cyber peace is part of the design ethos. If security is not part of the design ethos, so de-escalation of tensions and cyber peace is not part of them. This is why we are living in a day and age where espionage or misinformation, like my colleague Scott here and Joseph have highlighted is very well invested cluster in cybersecurity, invested in a cluster in cybersecurity. So the mass of a global investment goes beyond 300 billion to 500 billion in misinformation campaigns only. Imagine if you are existing in a social media platform that creates to your needs, to your detailed, verified level of information that should exist. You have a control over the transparency of information, over the authenticity of information that's being shared, and it's not being controlled through specific global mass media corporates. So what we're trying to do from the international dialogue is to break the current technology development cycle, make sure that we are understanding the importance of co-development when it comes to technology, and promotes for co-developments from user perspective and not just from national perspective across board. We can all sign treaties, but what is the efficacy of these treaties if you don't find commitment towards actualizing the different terms of those treaties on the ground?
Thank you very much. And Mr. Yarnetsky had something to add?
I think I was going to pivot onto the international point exactly, but I completely defer onto your answer to that because that's fantastic. I think there's another element though, which is, as expanded upon the individual, the international, but then it's also the business and the idea of responsibility as the private sector. Currently about 99% probably of infrastructure that is cyberspace, so to speak, is privately owned. This is mental when compared with previous conceptions of how we exist in security realms. So if you think about land was never owned that universally, never controlled that universally, never operated that universally by non-governmental actors. As such, there's a huge responsibility and role for the private sector to have in these kind of spaces. The concern is currently, I feel, they're taking it more and more and more, but there isn't the corresponding demand or accountability upon their legitimacy to act in that context. Microsoft, for example, ostensibly has provided support to Ukraine worth about 400 million, according to their estimates, since the start of the conflict. The nature of that support is undefined, or ill-defined at least, but represents, for example, activities related to shoring up the cybersecurity of Ukrainian government infrastructures, providing licenses, Microsoft 365 or something, and so on and so forth, to individuals in the country. But then it could also be other things. We don't know what it is, though, because there's no accountability, there's no legitimacy, I would argue, to some extent, for them to act in these kind of unilateral ways. And so there is a need for the international component as well to appreciate the innately multi-stakeholder nature of the environment. It's the brief intervention I would make on that.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, Mr. Goodstein.
Yeah, I briefly touched on this when I said liability. So if there's security patches and a major bank doesn't put that patch in place, are they protecting your money or not? And so until there's public outrage and more on the liability, that's, again, I think on the corporate and the private piece. On the government piece, do you even ask the questions of your government around safety? Every government has put in fire safety programs, but are they putting in digital safety programs to actually train grandma and grandpa on how to look for phishing scams?
Yeah, just reacting to Joseph and also Huda points on accountability and then on capacity building. I think you can have all the regulations and norms that you want, but if you don't have mechanisms or any framework that support the implementation of these norms, this is basically creating a void. And this is where the difficulty, I think, lay with cyber actions and creating accountability, because most of cyber attacks are actually happening under the threshold of the use of force. So we need, yes, to build capacity across the region, because there's a huge disparity. Not all nations, countries have the capabilities to map cyber attacks affecting critical infrastructure sectors. There's not, in some regions and countries, actually, mechanism for reporting incidents. I think we're seeing obviously a great traction from regions, particularly the EU, to make this sort of mandatory and compulsory. We've actually built with partners a framework which could be used by other nations on that frame. So we need also to have absolutely multiple stakeholders engaged in this conversation. There is, when we're talking about multiple stakeholders, you need to have the private sector. They own critical infrastructure, so they need to be around the table. They're probably already. You need to have civil society and academic. There's the amount of research that is being done by civil society and researchers on the field of cybersecurity is tremendous and can be leveraged, from mapping cyber incidents, mapping threat actors, mapping the impact of these on institutions, organizations, and on people. There are also other initiatives that are actually leveraging this is basically public-private partnership, and there are very specific other initiatives that we can look into as well. I mean, we don't really need to reinvent the wheel because there's a lot of tremendous efforts that are out there. There are efforts to partnership with private sector to support voluntarily NGOs in the humanitarian development sectors, for example, to help them where they're developing their cyber resilience. And we could imagine those being obviously applied and applicable in countries where there is no direct resources for now, to build capabilities now and potentially for the future. I also actually wanted to touch upon something just on international cooperation, because all these mechanisms will be valuable for building confidence and trust between nations. Confidence building measures have already actually kick-started since 2018 in the field of cybersecurity. But these will not be practically be useful if there are not these mechanisms to map incidents and the impact of cyber attacks. Just bearing in mind that we've seen confidence-building measures being extremely useful in situations as, decades ago when we were looking at the race, nuclear race, the armament and nuclear race, and arms control in the nuclear field. So I think we need to look at what has been done in the past and potentially replicate good practice today for cybersecurity.
Thank you very much. Mr. Svoboda, please.
I'm going to stress what has been mentioned slightly. This is the role of the intelligence or the secret service, because this is the part of the state. And the problem is that the political representation has no chance to verify to what extent the information which is coming from the secret service is correct or not. If the secret service is playing a game with the state or not. So this is also a very, very important point, because due to the recent development, the role and the power of the secret service and the intelligence has been increased dramatically. Because it is the question of trust, or the confidence. The government has no chance. So that's very important. So when we are speaking about the international cooperation, it is not among the nations. It is among the secret services. This is in the pool of the intelligence. So because there are the information we need for protecting our infrastructure and the state and the institutions.
Yes, indeed, it is very important to mention the data protection and privacy, especially because all of us are into this. So it's important to ask the question, like, and this is where I'm addressing this to general. So, balancing national security needs with individual privacy concerns is pivotal. So, how can nations navigate this balance when formulating cybersecurity strategies? So, data protection and privacy. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Mais permettez-moi tout d'abord, avant de répondre à votre question, d'apporter une petite contribution dans le cadre de la sécurisation, en tout cas de la lutte contre la cybersécurité. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, les réseaux sociaux ont fini de faire voler toutes les frontières géographiques des pays. Aujourd'hui, ce que nous vivons, c'est une réalité d'interconnexion dans le monde. Donc, par rapport à cela, nous avons devant la première étape pour un État, c'est de sécuriser les fichiers, tous les fichiers, notamment les fichiers des personnes physiques. Je prends un exemple. Mon pays, le Sénégal, compte une vingtaine de millions de personnes. La population sénégalaise est estimée à peu près à 20 millions. Alors, les 20 millions de Sénégalais, leurs fichiers, c'est-à-dire leur état civil, devraient être sécurisés. Comme ça, dans le cadre de la lutte contre le terrorisme, si une personne est interpellée à l'autre bout du monde et qu'il ait des papiers sénégalais, c'est-à-dire une fois que la réinformation remonte au Sénégal, qu'on puisse dire est-ce que réellement c'est un Sénégalais ou c'est pas un Sénégalais. Donc ça, c'est une première étape qui permet d'identifier les gens qui s'activent dans le cadre du terrorisme. Donc je pense que si chaque pays arrive à sécuriser le fichier de ces personnes physiques, la coopération internationale peut être bâtie à partir de cette étape-là. Et ça, je pense que c'est important.
Thank you very much. Indeed, yes, we should think more in terms of going beyond the borders. And this is why it is so important to actually apply the same measures all over the world. And Senegal, indeed, can be a role model. So many compliments from my side concerning the work that you've been doing. Okay, now let's open the session to the public. So what I would suggest is that we gather several questions. Please do introduce yourself, the institute that you're representing, and to whom you want to address the question. Yes, please. Let's gather some questions all together. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, so my name is Ashraf Sani. I'm from the School of Information Sciences in Rabat. So first of all, thank you to the panelists for the insightful discussion. So I have a question. As my field of study is data science and AI, so as we all know, AI is becoming more and more ubiquitous. So on one hand, we have the fact that AI presents innovative solutions to create, to defend against cyber attacks, but on the other hand, it can be weaponized to create more sophisticated attacks. So my question is, how do you see the balance between these two aspects evolving, and what measures can be implemented to mitigate the risks of AI being used in cyber warfare? Thank you.
Thank you very much. A second question. I saw some hands. If you can give the floor.
I think, as Mr. Goodstein said, it's really important to educate the older generations about cybersecurity. And I think one of the main problems, as Mr. also said, is healthcare. And I think it goes beyond a legal point of view. It's more of ethics. And it's really important to fight against it. So I have a really important question. What measures should be put upon? Because more and more companies, more and more people go on the cloud, and the cloud system, as we can know, it has gotten bigger and bigger and also more fragile throughout the years. And also I wanted to ask a question about biometric security, how reliable it is, how much we can trust it, because it's getting bigger, even our own phones or everywhere. And we want to know how much it actually is safe and how much it protects us. Thank you.
Can you introduce yourself before you pass the mic?
I'm Halima, 19. I'm from Akhawan University in Ifran.
Thank you. I saw a third hand. Yes, please. Yes.
Sorry, the lady has been trying here in front. The mic? Okay, here. Yeah.
Thank you.
please.
Hello, I'm Fatima Zahra Benjloun. I'm a second year student university from University Abdel Malik Saadi in business. Well, my question is, can you give us some tips to protect us as individual persons? Because I think that we don't have a private life anymore. I think that changing our password each 3 months are not enough anymore. Like when I try to Google something and I open Google, it's like if it was tracking me because he knew exactly what I'm looking for, what I'm going to search, and is very incredible. And I'm sure that it's heard our conversation. It's record everything, our daily life, everything. I'm sure of that. And I want to protect my private life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, let's have, how do you want to respond?
If I could touch on the
Yes?
first question, that'd be great. And then I can defer on the cyber hygiene and aspects there. It's a really interesting question in terms of how do you think about what AI is going to do for cyber offense and cyber defense, which I think is an oversimplification of what you're saying. Apologies, I didn't catch your name properly. Are you familiar with the MITRE kill chain framework? So MITRE is a kind of public-private organization based in the US that elaborates standards and other aspects of cybersecurity. And there's recently someone broke down in an article how AI can impact each phase of the MITRE kill chain, both on an offensive and a defensive context. So if we think about the initial stage of the attack, we're looking at reconnaissance. When we're looking at reconnaissance, we're thinking either the scanning of vulnerable endpoints in terms of a victim network, or just trying to build an ability to access through a particular individual, like phishing scams that have been mentioned previously. If you have AI, particularly if you have AI-enabled translation, not only can you produce a linguistically accurate phishing email, you can produce one that's sensitive to particular cultural contexts and business context. AI for reconnaissance becomes much more dangerous. I'm not going to go through the whole kill chain framework, obviously, but on the reverse, on the defense side, you have to monitor your networks constantly. If you're using, let's say, something like an attack surface monitoring facility, or you're kind of just monitoring at endpoints, as has been discussed previously, there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of noise. And what LLMs are very good at, and have been demonstrated to be very good at, is just kind of taking a ton of data and trying to understand what's worth focusing on. So very oversimplification. I would really recommend looking at the MITRE kill chain framework breakdown that I think was done by someone on behalf of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, ASPI. So those search terms on Google, which is obviously listening to us now anyway, will get you something.
Thank you very much. So in terms of order, we had Mr. Svoboda, Mrs. Alzaimi, and then Mr. Goldstein, please. Yes.
The question is very important. I have got 4 sons. We are still discussing this issue. And they are accusing me, they are saying, you are old-fashioned person. Yeah. Why? Because I have full trust to the state. And I said, look, I do understand that Google could intervene with your private communication. If your life is transparent, if you are not committing crimes, I believe that you are not committing crimes. And if you are not doing anything against maybe the normal rules of society. So in EU we have very strict regulations. We have. The question is to what extent the regulations are really effective. And on the other hand, I am saying that we need to have full trust in the state. I have the highest certificate of the secret information. I am the highest certificate in my country. That's why my mobile could be tapped by the state anytime. If you call me, please do not speak about the crimes, because it's the Czech Secret Service is informed them immediately. But we need a trust. So I understand that this is the 2 values. One is how to protect the privacy. It's very important. But on the other hand, the state have the power to protect the society and the state. So, and we need to find somewhere the compromise between the two positions. So, and be careful if you call me.
I think Ms. Amoudi was before me, so she can go first and then I will.
Yeah, I just wanted to address, I think, two of these questions because they seem to be quite related, just on the paradox of artificial intelligence. So yes, there is evidence that there are already AI-enabled tools that are being used by criminals to carry out their attacks. We also know that AI is being sort of used and researched in the field of cybersecurity to enable with the health check of the infrastructure systems. So that's why we're kind of setting it as a paradox. What we're seeing today is obviously, it's just the headlines every day. There are nations who are trying to regulate the developments, the production, and the use of AI. And I think we need regulations. We need principles on the use, on the responsible and ethic use of artificial intelligence, and also in a way that it protects the fundamental rights and freedom. So I think regulations is necessary. Just back to the cybersecurity field. I don't think that it will have to change completely the way that you protect yourself. And I think that you have to carry out those 3 key steps to protect yourself from disruptive emerging tech now and in the future, through prevention methods, through detection methods, but also actually through response. All these 3 steps need to take into consideration 3 key areas: the people, the processes, and the technology. So technology can support you in your detection processes and in your prevention processes. You need to establish a culture of cybersecurity within your community and your people. This basically answers your question. Yes, you have to protect your passwords. You have to actually store your passwords into applications that are actually secure. You have to install multi-factor authentication. You also actually have to acknowledge that there are phishing campaigns out there, and so when you are actually reading through your emails, you have to acknowledge that this email address seems to be exactly fake and not authentic. So I don't think that this will change with the emergence of emerging technologies.
Yes, thank you very much. Please.
I second all the opinions that have been voiced on the panel, but I think what is more important for us here to leave this session with is the understanding that cybersecurity is a multifaceted issue. It needs multi-stakeholder approach. It's not a political aspect. It's not a technical aspect. It's not a regulation concern. It's all of this together. And we need to have the society and the community at large, not just the government or the states, being active and building solutions around it. And your responsibility here is to be the devil advocate, to be the analytical brain, and make sure that you don't conform to what's being served for you in terms of a solid, robust, secure technology. I've been in the field for the past 20 years. We are developing cryptographic means. We're breaking cryptographic algorithms that has been built by the National Security Agency in the US, by different colleagues and collaborators across the universe. We're building for new hardware. We are building for the new AI tools and algorithms that are monitoring the accuracy and how these AI LLMs are behaving at the moment. Let it tell you one of the most prominent behaviors that we noticed recently. It's getting worse in terms of the status of security because developers of those technology think of functionality first, security later, and they don't embody the ethical, no matter how much governed they are by the multitudes of norms and practices and guides and de facto terms that are being built out there to build responsible technology. When you are sitting there to be the auditor and to be the actual researcher who are validating their claims, it's doesn't fall through most of the time. So I would encourage all of you to have an inquisitive mindset and try to always question what's being served for you. Don't sign on that kind of de facto concerned, term agreements for privacy and whatever it is, because I believe in nudging algorithms. I believe that all these kind of big tech are building technology for you. And if you say, we don't want to use this technology, we don't want to use this algorithms that you are serving for us, then a change is going to happen. When you are saying as consumer, we want as well a change in the regulation structure, a change in the protection mechanisms that are being built globally, then someone will listen, a government will listen, a global governance structure will be pulled together for this. So I encourage you to research, develop, and advocate for secure, robust, and much more peace-inducive cyber spheres.
Yes, Mr. Goodstein.
I'll be very brief and couldn't agree more with my colleagues on this panel that some of this is a little scary, and we just have to acknowledge that. But it's here to stay, it's here to last, and what are we going to do with it? How are we going to move forward as a society? So I'll leave you with this. I just asked good old-fashioned AI to answer the gentleman's question on cyber security risks from AI. But I always like asking my ChatGPT to do so in a limerick. So to dodge cyber threats, take a stand tight, encrypt data with cyber smarts bright, firewall strong, updates keen, stay vigilant, tech hygiene. Keep safe online, day and night. So it's there, it's here to last. Use it for fun, but use it and definitely engage with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. It was very brightful to have all these insights from your side. Thank you very much to the public and to all the questions asked. Have a nice afternoon.